Yeah. Okay, nice. Part two.
Yep.
Thank you for experimenting with us. All right. So we're back.
So we're back, and we were
Where
in
were
the
we?
middle of, let's see, my brain just quit. Oh, event, like what type of events do I do? Let's see. In addition to, so we talked about the ladies events that I do quarterly, the monthly events. I always try to do a spring and a fall paired dinner. Um, so I'm pretty choosy about the brand or the, whomever I have coming in, because I want to make sure that like I know their whiskey is really good, and so I'll get samples from them, and then I have a chef that I work with. I started working with a kind of a private chef this year,
Wow.
and we just had our spring dinner Tuesday. So
Okay.
we paired 5 different whiskeys, and it's a gentleman who makes rye, bourbon, single malt, corn whiskey that's hickory smoked, and then a port finished single malt. And then we paired it with a charcuterie, a salad, like a pecan encrusted shrimp, some
Sounds
pork.
delicious.
Yeah, so it was. It's a lot of work for me, but um, but I think my members really enjoy it. It's like they're just so much fun.
How do you work on pairing the dishes with the bourbon? You sit
Um,
together and you experiment, or
yeah. So last year I would, and I didn't get a chance to this year. The chef that I work with, he's just crazy busy with stuff. So I gave him samples and said, I have an idea of some of the things that I think it would pair well with,
hmm
but you go taste. Um, and with your chef's palate, you come up with a menu. And what he came back with was really great. Um, Last year, I would tweak a tiny bit. Um, with our fall, I really do want to carve some time out with with the chef I'm working with, so that we can taste together and kind of spitball a little bit. Because
what
there's
goes, so can you give me a few tips? What goes well with single malts? What is the palette for single
uh,
malts generally, broadly? Not that.
yeah, that's a great question. We so the 2 single malts that we did, we put it with kind of charcuterie for this, and then the port finished, like it just tasted like like what immediately came to my mind was chocolate and caramel. So he did a salted caramel and pretzel and dark chocolate. Um, I'm working with a friend. She and her husband own a distillery in the Vail Valley area of Colorado, and we they all they have are single malt. And so we were like one like set like it had this citrus taste, and I think it all kind of depends on like what's that. Is there a specific aroma that you're getting or a specific taste? And so we kind of came up with like a really like a gardeny salad that's got um, like maybe citrus slices, and maybe with a like a citrusy vinaigrette. Um, I'm trying to think what another one that they have a peated single malt, and we were just getting really desserty notes out of that. So chocolate and
Peated with desserty notes. I like that.
like it's like the peated whiskey. It's not like a Lafroig or any of the Isla single malts. It just has got this really nice, um, what do I want to call it, like caramelly, chocolatey notes. So I'm like, you got to do dessert with this one. What was the other one? The other one, I think like it could stand up like it's a plain single malt that I think could stand up really well with like a meat dish.
hmm
Um, what were we getting? Like had like maybe some sugary, like a brown sugar, some kind of sweet on it.
It sounds phenomenal.
Like I think
Sounds
it
like
could
a lot of fun to.
be lamb. Yeah. So there in the thing with single malt, I don't have a huge, deep experience with Scotch single malts.
Mhm.
Obviously, kind of more some of the Islay peated. I'm trying to think who else have I had. Some of the blended so I don't have a deep experience in that, but I find here in the United States, like our American single malt, there's just such a wide variety of tastes. It's really weird. I mean, it's weird in a good way. I mean, really unique depending on whether you're being made
The
up
terroir and
West, or if you're Balcones and you're in Texas, or we've got so much single malt being made here in Colorado, Virginia distilling out in Virginia.
So can you give us like a description of the lay of the land for Colorado whiskey?
So if you remember back in kind of like 80s and 90s, I'm trying to remember when the big craft brewery boom started. I think maybe in the 80s and really up in the Pacific Northwest. But Colorado kind of quickly became a hotbed of craft. We have so many craft breweries here in Colorado. And then I think it kind of spread too. But kind of out of that, beginning in I'm trying to think, when did our first one, in the early 2000s, like 2005, 2008, we had a number of people starting to think, that I think probably came from the craft brewery industry, like, hey, I know how to make beer. Making whiskey's one step further down the line. Because essentially you're making beer, you're fermenting it. But, So Stranahan's is owned by Proximo, and I can't remember when they started. I want to say 2005, 2006 started, and they make single malt, American single malt. We have a distillery out here in Palisade. Palisade is kind of our wine country. So we have a lot of grape brewers, a lot of peaches, like some of the I will say the best peaches come from Palisade. Those in Georgia might argue with me. But they started making, because of all the orchards and the availability of fruit, it's like, oh, we can make brandy and peach brandy, but also began making whiskey. So they're our second distillery. And then distilling just kind of blew up here. We've got a large number.
2010, that's when it's
I would say like 2012, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are kind of when we just saw a really big boom. We still have people opening the doors.
How many distilleries are there in?
I knew you were going to ask that. I probably should have looked up. I am not going to guess correctly, but I'm
tens or hundreds or
going to guess 50 plus.
That's impressive.
So, obviously a lot of whiskey, but a lot of, neutral spirits, vodka, gin. But, everybody's always trying to strive for that whiskey. We have the very first single pot still distillery in the United States here in Colorado. It's called Talnua. And, it's a couple that fell in love with, we're on a honeymoon in Ireland and tasted Redbreast as it was just kind of starting to reemerge again. And they make some pretty spectacular single pot still whiskey. If you don't know what single pot still whiskey is, it's the Irish tradition, 50 unmalted, 50 malted. We've got, people might be familiar with Law's Whiskey House, Distillery 291, are some more that are distributed outside of Colorado and pretty much around the country, pretty wide distribution. Breckenridge Distilling is another one, as is Stranahan's. But like Boulder Spirits is starting to make a name for itself with bourbon and American single malt primarily. But we've got a lot of really good distillers here, a lot of women-owned, women-distilled whiskey too. So we've got a lot of women. We've got some of the first B Corp and distilleries, a rum distillery down in Crested Butte, and a marble distilling owned by a woman and her husband, and like complete recycle, solar energy, recycling the water. So, and Eagle River Whiskey is getting ready to build a distillery that they want to be a B Corp. So kind of thinking about, climate change and how do we can you think about all that water that's wasted when you're making whiskey, right? Or any spirit. So we've got a lot of innovation and really a very unique terroir here in Colorado. We're very hot, we're very dry, we're hot, we're cold, and sometimes we're 85 degrees in the morning or during the day, but then we could drop to below freezing. So, that impact that it has on those barrels. And then
how long are the barrels aged for usually? What's the Angel share over there?
Yeah, significantly higher. So I want to say if people are kind of trying to push to have whiskey out, I've seen some 18-month whiskey, which is okay. It's significant. Like we get really good whiskey around 4 to 5, 6, 7 years. When we start to get to 10 years, there's not a lot left. And it's
what's the flavor? 10 years in.
So, yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think how to describe it, because I think a lot of Colorado whiskey I can usually determine a Colorado whiskey, like, oh, this is a Colorado whiskey. Connie Baker from Marble Distilling, she was a guest of mine in February. She had somebody tell her that like there was this note of pencil shavings. And she took a little offense to it, but as I think as she kind of processed that, and I think about that when I taste some of our whiskey, but it's not a bad thing. It's just like grain that's grown here in Colorado because of our temperature, changes. Our grains just taste differently, and things ferment differently, and then age way quicker than like a Kentucky whiskey, or obviously, like Scotland and Ireland, like things can sit in a barrel for 20, 30 years and still have whiskey. Yeah, like our Angel share, we'll lose 7 to 8% a year. That first year, 10%.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so significantly more. But we still get really amazing aromas and flavors, but they're different from a Kentucky whiskey or a whiskey or a.
It reminds me of the the Kavalan and the Israeli whiskey that are also aged in super hot climates, and you have to take them out after 3 years or 4 years, because otherwise there's nothing left.
Yep.
But it still has a very sweet, its own character. So you're making me more and more curious about Colorado whiskey. So if I plan to come for a visit, is it like 2 or 3 days to cover everything, or do I need a week?
It depends how far you want to get out of Denver. There's within Denver metro area, and when I say Denver metro area, like we've got Fort Collins, and there's one like Old Elk. Old Elk was kind of started with Greg Metz. Greg Metz was at MGP for 30 some years. And so they're starting, they've sourced some MGP barrels because of his connections, but they're also distilling there. And I'm actually going to go up next week and visit with I think she's their production manager. So there's Old Elk, but then down in the Springs, there's a couple, obviously Distillery 291, and they're doing bourbon and rye, but like finished with aspen staves. And that's kind of always been their.
What's aspen staves?
So aspen is a tree that's grown. It's pretty widely, at least in Colorado. beautiful gold leaves, in the fall. But they'll take these staves that they charcoal, what do I want to say? Like burn, I guess, over.
Yeah, toaster. Yeah, toaster char.
Thank you, toast. Duh. We'll toast, plop them into their casks, and they'll sit there for about a month. And then, so it's got this very unique. They do everything
After they've been distilled in the American oak, they're going to get a finish in
they
the.
mature in. They typically use a smaller format barrel.
Mhm.
Anywhere between 10 to 30. They do have stuff in 53 gallon, but also at a very high proof. So in the 130 proof. So
I'm coming tomorrow. Yeah.
Probably, oh my gosh, there's so many distilleries, but like if you could hit 6 or 7, one up in Fort Collins, one down in the Springs, and then here on the Western Slope. Oh, and Boulder's got, obviously Boulder Spirits. Out here, we've got a handful of distilleries. I'm trying to think, Salida BV. So like a week, you could probably do a couple of days in Denver.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, hit the Springs and then kind of work your way across the divide and hit, kind of the high points. There's like I said, a couple of them out here that are well worth visiting. Storm King Distilling down in Montrose.
So with that, with all of your your knowledge of the distilleries and the club that has 2.5 years, almost 3, so what are your future plans for the Western Slope Whiskey Club?
I know I'm trying to, like, how long am I going to do this gig? I would like to continue probably for at least another couple of years doing this. And at some point in time when, maybe I want to do more extended travel, maybe I pull back on the number of events I'm doing, or if someone wants to take it over. I'm not 22 anymore. So I'm not sure. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I've got folks who want to come to the event, and I've got folks who want to venture out onto the side of the world, and we'll kind of see what the next couple of years brings. But I have a huge list of people already that I want to talk to for 2025. And
can you share the list, or is it a secret?
Yeah, well, like this year I have like next month we're doing a world. I guess it should be a European whiskey. We're going to do rye and malted rye and single malt and single pot still from Poland, Ireland.
Wow.
Finland. Who am I missing? Italy. So I've had whiskey. It's Clowen. That's a brand out of Ireland. And I've had the particular one we're going to taste.
So you're going to bring an ambassador from each.
Yeah, it's I've got a rep from a distributor who's kind of their spirits educator who's going to come and do that event. He's a really great guy. We've got Virginia Distilling. They're out of Livingston, Virginia. Yeah. Let's see. Leopold Brothers is a distillery in Denver, and they owned by 2 brothers who are just amazing. They started in the beer world, but they have a 3-chamber still, kind of like old world. They had Vendome build the still, and they load at the top. They load the mash at the top and it distills down. I'm trying to figure out how it works. I was there on a tour, and I'm going back next week or in 2 weeks to kind of figure out how it all works. But they
wow,
make
it sounds. I heard the name. Yeah, so I'm curious.
Yeah, let's see who else. I've got a rep from William and Grant, so they do Belveni, Monkey Shoulder, and I forget what the other one is. So I wanted to make sure that we did Scotch whiskey this year. I'm doing a dinner with Law's Whiskey. We've got Green River out of Owensboro, Kentucky. They're owned by Bardstown Distilling.
Wow, you have a packed schedule.
Yeah, Montana rum. Montana, they make like amazing rum, and they're down in Crested Buttes. I like to always have another spirit. And then hopefully next year can get like Old Elk, let's see who else, New Riff, Cedar Ridge. Trying to think who else. Holiday Distilling, which is in Missouri.
Mhm.
Bardstown. I definitely want Bardstown. I'd love to have the guys from Pursuit Spirits come out here. They're sourcing, but blending. These guys have a podcast. I learn a lot from them. And then sprinkle in, obviously get sprinkled in some Colorado distilleries. We've got a Hogsback distillery. They do peated American single malt as well.
Mhm.
And Whiskey Del Bach. They're out of Tucson, Arizona, and make single malt, but also a mesquite smoked single malt. That is, it tastes like Tucson. If anybody's ever been in Tucson or in the Sonoran Desert, it's kind of my favorite place to be when the snakes are asleep, aka February.
You have a schedule. You have a planned packed schedule. That's impressive.
Maybe I'll do it until I run out of distilleries. That's a lot of years.
2,300. So 7 years and you're good.
Be in a wheelchair, rolling into events.
Okay, Deborah, is there anything else that you want to share before we leave the live?
Yeah, I think, let's see, I'm trying to think, do I get on my soapbox or do I not? I think the biggest thing that I always like to tell people is, I feel like we have so much more, if you're in the whiskey world, a whiskey enthusiast, whiskey curious, we get a lot of marketing thrown at us to try this big brand or that big brand, or, ooh, we're releasing this 25-year-old, it's $200, $250, and you can find it for maybe, $2,000 on the secondary. But ask for recommendations for other brands, because we've got 2,000 distilleries here in the United States and many more outside of the United States, craft distilleries that are making good whiskey. Look for those in the, whatever your price range is, but there's a lot of good stuff being made from $30 to $70. That's dynamite. That's on the shelf all the time. And give these craft distilleries a chance. Go visit your local craft distillery too, and taste the whiskey and buy a bottle from them. Support them.
100%. Yeah. Just like we said, these are the people that are. It's not easy to run a distillery.
No,
and it's not financially rewarding all the time. So it's only the people that are super passionate about it.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we want to meet, talk to, support. So for sure, I'm with you there.
Great women and men pouring their hearts into it. And there's a lot of really great whiskey out there that they're making. So go buy a bottle or two or three. Support your liquor store. Don't go to the grocery store. Support your liquor store.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Cheers. It was so nice.
I'm really looking forward to visiting your club sometime in the next 6 months.
Definitely got to reach out. All right. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye. Bye.